No one wished to dance with the blind Duke. The chandeliers of Ashworth Manor burned bright that night, spilling golden light over silk gowns and polished marble floors. Music rose high and proud, and laughter floated through the ballroom like sweet perfume. It was a night built for romance and display, for proud mothers and hopeful daughters. Yet at the far edge of the room, near the tall wall draped in velvet, stood a man alone. Duke Oliver Bramwell stood straight and still, one gloved hand resting lightly on his walking stick. His dark hair was neatly brushed back, his coat cut perfectly to his broad shoulders. To anyone watching, he was every inch a nobleman. But his green eyes did not move with the dancers. They stared forward, empty of sight. 3 years earlier, a riding accident had taken his vision, and with it, the easy charm that once ruled ballrooms, just like this one. Before that day, Oliver had led every dance. Women had waited for his attention. Men had sought his advice. Now they only offered sympathy. The orchestra swelled into a lively waltz. Slippers brushed marble. Dresses whispered as couples spun past him. Oliver listened carefully, mapping the room through sound alone. He could tell who laughed too loudly, who whispered behind fans, who avoided coming too close. No one asked him to dance. He did not blame them. A blind partner was an embarrassment, a risk, a reminder that fortune could turn cruel without warning. Still, as the music rose higher, a quiet ache settled in his chest. He remembered the feeling of leading a partner across the floor, and the simple joy of movement and trust. Those days felt like someone else's life. Lord Ashworth approached with loud, cheerful steps. "Bramwell, my dear fellow, it's good you came tonight. The season is dull without you." Oliver offered a polite smile. "I fear the season is managed quite well without me." Ashworth cleared his throat. "Nonsense. There are new families in town. Fresh faces. You must not hide yourself away." Hide. The word struck deeper than Ashworth intended. Oliver had hidden. After the accident, he retreated from society. Each gathering had become a performance of false cheer, of pretending not to hear the pity in every greeting. "I am not hiding," Oliver said evenly. "I am merely standing still." Ashworth laughed awkwardly and soon excused himself, leaving Oliver once more at the edge of joy. The music shifted into a slower melody. Couples paired off again. Still, no one approached him. Across the ballroom, a young woman stood near a pillar. Watching, Rosa Collins did not belong among the glittering gowns and heavy jewels. Her dress was simple pale blue, neatly pressed but modest. She stood beside Lady Thornton, the elderly widow she served as companion. Sarah had learned to make herself small in grand rooms. Companions were present, but never central. They fetched shawls, carried messages, and stood quietly while others enjoyed attention. But tonight, she could not stop looking at the Duke. She had heard the whispers, of course. Everyone had. The tragic accident, the lost sight, the once brilliant man reduced to a figure of sympathy. Yet that was not what she saw. She saw a man standing tall despite isolation. A man listening carefully, as if the world spoke in ways others could not hear. A man who deserved more than to be treated like fragile glass. Another waltz began. Sarah watched as couples passed close to him, skirts brushing the air near his coat, yet none daring to pause. His fingers tightened slightly around his cane. Something inside her shifted. "Lady Thornton," Sarah said softly, "may I step away for a moment?" The older woman studied her with wise eyes. "Of course, my dear." Sarah smoothed her gloves and walked across the ballroom. Each step felt heavier than the last. She could feel the eyes already turning toward her. A companion did not approach a duke uninvited. She stopped before him. "Your Grace." Oliver turned his head toward her voice. It was warm, steady, not nervous, not pitying. Yes?" "My name is Sarah Collins. I was wondering—" She took a quiet breath. "Would you honor me with this dance?" The music seemed to falter, though it did not truly pause. Conversations around them softened into shock. Oliver stood very still. He had grown used to kindness wrapped in careful tones. But this voice held none of that careful distance. It held invitation. "You wish to dance with me?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she answered simply. "If you are willing." A faint smile touched his lips. "I must warn you, I have not danced in 3 years. Then we shall both be learning tonight," she said gently. He extended his arm. Gasps rippled through the room. Sarah placed her hand lightly on his sleeve, steady and sure. Together they stepped onto the dance floor. At first, Oliver's movements were cautious. He listened for the rhythm, for the subtle shift in Sarah's breathing. She guided him with the softest pressure of her hand, never pulling, never pushing, just enough. "You're doing wonderfully," she whispered. "I am following your lead." "You are leading," she replied softly. "I am only reminding you of the steps." Something in her words loosened a knot inside him. The memory returned slowly. The turn, the glide, the gentle sweep of the waltz. His body remembered what fear had hidden. They moved as one. Around them, the room had gone nearly silent. People watched, astonished, uncertain whether they witnessed bravery or madness. Oliver did not care. For the first time since the accident, he did not feel like an object of pity. He felt like a man again. When the music ended, applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger. Sarah stepped back slightly, her cheeks flushed, but her chin lifted proudly. "Thank you," Oliver said, his voice low with emotion. "For what?" "For seeing me." Her breath caught. "I only saw a gentleman who deserved a dance." He laughed softly, a sound of pure warmth rarely heard in recent years. "Miss Collins," he said, "might I call upon you tomorrow?" A hush fell again. She hesitated only a moment. "Yes, Your Grace. Lady Thornton receives visitors in the afternoon." "Then I shall come." As Sarah returned to her place beside Lady Thornton, whispers followed her like wind through leaves. Shock, disapproval, curiosity. But beneath it all, something else stirred. Hope. Oliver remained standing in the center of the floor long after she left, as if absorbing the echo of the moment. No one else asked him to dance that night. No, he did not mind. For the first time in years, the darkness around him felt less heavy. Across the room, Sarah pressed a trembling hand to her chest. She knew what she had done would cause talk, perhaps trouble. Yet as she remembered the way he had smiled when she placed her hand in his, she knew she would do it again without hesitation. Sometimes a single step onto a dance floor could change 2 lives forever. Neither of them knew that by morning, all of London would be whispering, and neither of them yet understood how fiercely society would fight to keep them apart. By morning, London was alive with whispers. In drawing rooms across Mayfair, women leaned close over porcelain teacups and spoke the Duke's name in lowered tones. Gentlemen folded newspapers with raised brows and slow shakes of their heads. But the blind Duke had danced. Not only danced, but with a companion. At Bramwell House, Duke Oliver sat in his study, his fingers moving across a sheet of braille. Yet he was not reading the words beneath his touch. His thoughts were still in the ballroom, still feeling the warmth of Sarah's hand resting trustingly in his. Thomas, his loyal valet, stood nearby in careful silence. "Your Grace," Thomas said at last, "there are already visitors calling, Lord Ashworth among them." Oliver gave a faint smile. "I expected as much." He rose, straightened his coat, and set aside the paper. For 3 years, he had avoided confrontation. For 3 years, he had accepted the quiet shrinking of his world. No longer. When he entered the drawing room, the air felt heavy. Lord Ashworth stood beside Lady Margaret and her daughter, Lady Catherine. The scent of expensive perfume lingered sharply. "Bramwell," Ashworth began carefully, "we thought it best to speak with you at once." Oliver inclined his head politely. "Then speak." Lady Margaret stepped forward. "Your Grace, last evening's display has caused considerable concern." "Display?" Oliver repeated calmly. "The dance," Lady Catherine said sweetly. "It was unexpected." "I found it refreshing," Oliver replied. Lady Margaret's tone cooled. "Miss Collins is a companion, a woman of no fortune or position. But your attention to her has raised unfortunate speculation." Oliver felt the familiar tightening in his chest, but he did not retreat. "Speculation is society's favorite pastime." "This is not a jest," Lady Margaret pressed. "You are a duke. You must consider your future, your responsibilities." "I am well aware of my responsibilities." Lady Catherine moved closer. "You are vulnerable, Your Grace. After your accident, it is only natural that gratitude might feel like affection." Oliver turned his face toward her voice. His expression hardened. "Gratitude," he said slowly, "is not what I felt last night." Silence followed. Lord Ashworth cleared his throat. "We only mean to protect you." "From what?" Oliver asked. "From being made a fool," Lady Margaret said bluntly. "From marrying beneath you." The words hung in the air. Oliver's hands clenched behind his back. "I would advise you," he said quietly, "never to speak of Miss Collins in such a manner again." They left shortly after, unsatisfied and unconvinced. But Oliver stood taller than he had in years. That afternoon, he arrived at Lady Thornton's townhouse. Sarah waited in the small drawing room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had heard the whispers already. Even the servants spoke of it in hushed tones. When Oliver entered, guided gently by the butler, her heart raced. "Your Grace." "Sarah," he said softly. Lady Thornton greeted him warmly before excusing herself with clear intention. When they were alone, silence stretched between them. "You should know," Sarah began carefully, "that London is speaking of us." "So I have gathered." She looked at him fully. "Yet they will not be kind." "I am accustomed to unkindness," he replied. "It does not frighten me." "It frightens me," she admitted. Her honesty struck him deeper than any accusation from society. "I do not wish to harm your life," she continued. "You deserve peace." Oliver moved closer, guided by the sound of her breathing. "For 3 years," he said, "I have had peace. Silence. Isolation. It is not a gift, Sarah." She swallowed. "What I felt when we danced," he continued, "was life returning to me." Her breath trembled. "You treated me as though I were whole." "You are whole," she said fiercely. His hand found hers. "And you," he said, "are the first person who has made me believe it again." Tears filled her eyes. "But I am only a companion," she whispered. "You are Sarah Collins," he replied firmly. "Intelligent, brave, kind. Those qualities outweigh any title." Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Lady Harrington's voice carried before she even entered. "Miss Collins, I must speak with you at once." She swept into the room without waiting for permission, her expression sharp. "Your Grace," she said stiffly. "How? Devoted." Oliver remained composed. "Lady Harrington." She turned to Sarah. "You must end this at once." Sarah's back straightened. "End what, exactly?" "This fantasy. The entire city is laughing." "Let them laugh," Oliver said. Lady Harrington ignored him. "Miss Collins, you cannot possibly imagine yourself as a duchess." "I imagine myself as a wife," Sarah replied quietly. The room went still. Lady Harrington's face flushed. "You overreach." "I care for him," Sarah said steadily. "And what do you offer him?" Lady Harrington snapped. "He needs strength, guidance." Sarah stepped closer to Oliver, her voice calm. "He needs love." Oliver felt her hand tighten around his. Lady Harrington scoffed. "Love does not sustain estates." "No," Oliver said, "but neither does cold ambition." The older woman stared at them both. "This will not end well," she warned before storming out. Silence settled once more. Sarah's courage faltered slightly. "Perhaps she is right." "Do you believe that?" Oliver asked. She hesitated. "I believe the world is cruel." "Then we shall be stronger." He turned toward her fully. "Sarah, I will not pretend this will be easy, but I would rather face difficulty beside you than safety alone." Her heart pounded. "You speak as though I know my own heart," he finished gently. And he reached up, his fingers brushing her cheek with careful reverence. "I care for you deeply." The words hung between them like fragile glass. "I care for you too," she whispered. Outside, carriage wheels rolled along the street. Somewhere, London continued its gossip. But inside that small drawing room, something stronger was forming. Not scandal, not foolishness. Something steady and certain. A love that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And the storm gathering over them had only just begun. The storm did not wait. Within days, the whispers turned into open judgment. Invitations stopped arriving at Bramwell House. Old friends suddenly found themselves too busy to call. Newspapers printed careful lines about noblemen making unwise attachments. Carriages slowed when Sarah walked past, just long enough for curtains to shift and eyes to stare. Yet Oliver did not retreat. If anything, he stepped forward. One morning, as pale autumn light touched the windows, he sent word through London. He would host a dinner, and he would formally announce his intentions. When the message reached society, disbelief followed. "He cannot mean to embarrass himself so completely," Lady Margaret said sharply in her drawing room. "Oh, he means to," Lady Harrington replied. "And we shall see how long this foolishness lasts." That evening, Bramwell House stood bright and unashamed. Candles burned warmly in every window. The long dining table was set with silver and crystal, yet the atmosphere held something different from past gatherings. There was no performance, only purpose. Aunt Sarah stood at the top of the stairs in a gown of soft ivory. It was not overly grand, but it suited her. Her dark hair was swept neatly back. Her hands trembled only slightly. Lady Thornton adjusted the lace at her sleeve. "You may lose their approval," she said gently, "but you will never lose your dignity." Sarah nodded. Below, Oliver stood waiting near the fireplace. He looked composed, yet his heart beat heavily in his chest. Tonight would decide everything. The guests arrived in waves of polite curiosity. Some came to witness a scandal. Others came hoping to prevent one. Lady Margaret entered with stiff grace. Lord Ashworth followed, his face lined with concern. Lady Catherine moved like a pale shadow beside her mother. The murmurs quieted as Sarah descended the staircase. Every eye turned, while Oliver heard the shift in the room. He felt it in the air. "She is here?" he asked softly. "Yes," Thomas whispered. "She looks radiant." Sarah crossed the room and stopped beside him. Without hesitation, she slipped her hand into his. The gesture alone sent a ripple through the crowd. Oliver lifted his chin. "My friends," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Thank you for coming." Silence deepened. For 3 years, I believed my life had narrowed beyond repair. I believed my blindness had taken not only my sight, but my place in this world. He paused. Then one evening, when no one wished to dance with me, a woman stepped forward. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. She did not see a burden. She did not see tragedy. She saw a man. Sarah's grip tightened gently, and in doing so, she gave me back my courage. The room held its breath. "I intend to marry Miss Sarah Collins." The words fell clean and final. Gasps broke free. Lady Margaret rose halfway from her seat. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious in my life." "This is madness," Lord Ashworth muttered. Oliver remained calm. "It is clarity." Lady Catherine's voice trembled. "You will regret this." "No," he said quietly. "I regret only the years I wasted living in fear." He turned slightly toward Sarah. "Miss Collins has more strength than many born into title. She has more kindness than many raised in privilege, and she has my heart." The truth of his voice carried beyond doubt. Sarah stepped forward then, her own courage rising. "I know I am not what society expects," she said. "I do not bring wealth or status, but I bring loyalty. I bring devotion. I bring the promise to stand beside him, not because he is a duke, but because he is Oliver." Some guests lowered their eyes. Others softened. Lady Harrington's lips pressed thin. "You will be isolated." "Then we will build something new," Sarah replied. The tension hung heavy. Then, unexpectedly, an older gentleman rose from the far end of the table. Dr. Harrison, Oliver's longtime physician and friend. "I stand with the Duke," he said firmly, "and with Miss Collins. I have watched him suffer in silence. I have seen what her presence has restored in him." A murmur spread. One by one, a few others nodded. Not many, but enough. Lady Margaret gathered her shawl sharply. "Come, Catherine. We will not witness this farce." They left in a sweep of silk. Several others followed, yet some remained. The dinner continued, smaller but warmer. When the last guest departed, silence settled gently over Bramwell House. Sarah released a long breath. "It has begun," she whispered. "Yes," Oliver said. "Are you afraid?" He considered the question. "Only of losing you." She stepped closer. "You will not." He reached up, touching her face softly. "Then I am not afraid at all." The days that followed were difficult. More doors closed. More whispers followed them. But something else happened too. The letters arrived. Quiet notes of support from those who admired courage more than convention. Families from Oliver's estates sent messages of gratitude, remembering his fairness long before his accident. And slowly, the noise of scandal began to fade. Because love, when lived openly and without shame, becomes harder to attack. A month later, on a quiet morning filled with pale sunlight, Oliver and Sarah stood in the small chapel on his estate. There were no grand crowds, only Lady Thornton, Dr. Harrison, a few loyal friends, and the steady voice of the vicar. When Oliver spoke his vows, his voice did not shake. When Sarah answered, her words carried no doubt. "I do." Their hands joined, their hearts sealed. Outside the chapel doors, the wind moved gently through the trees. No one cheered, no one protested. But there was only peace. As husband and wife, they stepped into a world that had not expected them to succeed. And in time, they did more than succeed. They hosted gatherings not built on gossip, but on purpose. They opened their home to those often overlooked. They showed London that blindness did not weaken a leader, and that humility did not diminish a duchess. Years later, when people spoke of them, they no longer whispered scandal. They spoke of partnership, of kindness, of strength. And sometimes, on warm evenings, when music drifted softly through Bramwell House, the Duke and his Duchess would take the floor together. He would lead. She would follow. And anyone watching would see what society once failed to understand. That the most impossible love stories begin with something very simple: a hand extended, and the courage to accept it.